Welcome, everyone, to this Nurses Week Acceleration Series and tonight's conversation, From Plant to Protocol, the future of cannabis as medicine. We are living through a remarkable moment in healthcare. Cannabis is no longer being discussed only in whispers and on the sidelines. It is becoming part of real clinical conversations, real patient care, and real healthcare systems. What makes this session especially meaningful is that we're joined by leaders who have helped shape this movement from very different perspectives: research, advocacy, law, education, and lived experience. Tonight is about science, but it's also about curiosity, courage, collaboration, and the willingness to rethink what healing can look like. I invite everyone to stay open this evening, stay engaged, and really lean into this conversation, because the future of cannabis medicine isn't being built somewhere far away. It's being built by conversations just like this one. So I want to welcome Dr. Lakisha and Lynn Mathre, and attorney Scheril Powell will be joining us when she can find a quiet place to join us. But I want to welcome you ladies. Thank you for being here and sharing in this conversation today.
Of course. Very glad to be here.
So I did want to start off the conversation by acknowledging that cannabis has come a long way in healthcare conversations over the years. And I just wanted to kind of pick your brain and ask you, what moment made you realize this work was truly beginning to shift into the mainstream?
The moment where I realized that it was truly shifting into mainstream, coming from California, that we legalized medically early on, is when other states were coming on board and trade organizations were starting to be formed, around the industry. And then the international stage, came into play, because at this point, there honestly, because, I do deal in the international, there's a global cannabis industry that exists. And so you can't deny that it's mainstream when literally the world is participating.
And I look back and I think it's so sad, because I'm in Virginia and close to University of Virginia, Thomas Jefferson's University. And it was way back when I was working as the addictions consult nurse at the hospital. And I went into the basement of the library to their historic center. And I wanted to see what was written about cannabis back in the day, in Jefferson's day. And the librarian down there, it was under lock and key, this place with all their precious material. And I told her what I was doing, and she pointed me in the direction of this case. And it was an old medical case that had the essential medicines back in Jefferson's day. And I was excited. I said, oh, good, open it up. And I went right to, it was alphabetically there, and I went right to it, and it's cannabis. So it was such a good medicine there. And then it's like, and then we lost it with the whole prohibition, the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act, the putting it in Schedule 1. So moving forward, my aha moment when it was medicine was just doing my thesis on people using it recreationally and finding out from a survey doing my master's degree that they were using it medicinally. Woke up, and then you're thinking everything's going to change. And again, slowly. So I think one thing that really changed was Sanjay Gupta, when he did his thing with the CBD.
Yeah. Because
all of a sudden it was like we're state by state, they're kind of recognizing medical cannabis. And Gupta's show comes on, and you see Charlotte Figge and this little girl with her seizure disorders and the miracle that could happen. And this was not about getting high. And all of a sudden, states around throughout the country were passing these CBD laws. Granted, it's messed up because they keep trying to divide this poor little plant into things instead of recognizing it's the wonderful plant that it is, the whole plant that it is. But I think that's when it's like people woke up, and it's like, yes, it's not just about getting high, people. This stuff has medicine. And of course, the more we can teach people about the endocannabinoid system, that was my aha for, now I can explain why it works so well for so many different things, because we don't have medicine that works for helping you with sleep and with pain and with anxiety and with depression and with seizures, et cetera, et cetera. But it is an exciting time.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up too, talking about the aha moment of learning about the endocannabinoid system. Because Mary Lynn, you and I have a special relationship in that I had been a cannabis nurse. I'd never met another cannabis nurse. For like 3 or 4 years, I was working with patients as a medical director for a dispensary in New Mexico. And one of the doctors had said to me, "Hey, Heather, I'm going to Tucson to this medical cannabis conference." And I'd never been to a medical cannabis conference. And I said, "Oh man, well, I got to work that day, but I'll try to finish up work and then take the 10-hour drive to Tucson." I literally showed up at like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning for this conference. But when I called the number to find out about this conference, Mary Lynn, you answered the phone. And you were the first cannabis nurse I had ever spoken to. And it was pivotal for me. And you said, "Come on down. We're going to have a luncheon for nurses, and we really need you to be here." And I thought I had a mission. I needed to go. But once I got there, Mary Lynn, I listened during your conference. It was the first time that I ever heard researchers talking about the endocannabinoid system. And I swear to you, the top of my head blew off. I was like, what? We have an endocannabinoid system? And I was amazed. I had no idea. And like you said, it made everything else make sense. Went, oh, now I get it. I've been working with that plant for years without understanding the science. And I did it safely and I did it effectively. But having the knowledge, that really made the difference. So thank you for bringing that up, because that sparked a core memory for me as well. So, Dr. Lakisha, I want to congratulate you on your acquisition of a new research center. This is super exciting. And I want to ask you what inspired, I've known you for a long time. You've done a lot of different things in the industry. What inspired you to take this leap and to start writing this new chapter? And what possibilities are you most excited about exploring there?
Well, thank you. It is definitely an undertaking. It's definitely going to be a labor of love, as everything in my life is. But, really, I understand, especially in watching the global cannabis market, come online, that there is a target market of client that is not being addressed at all. We currently have in this industry everyone sort of competing for the same theoretical client, and that is in the culture and the adult use sector of cannabis. I'm glad you brought up the fact that you had an aha moment when it's like, oh, there is an endogenous cannabinoid system, it exists, wow, like there's a science behind it. For me, it's the science. I'm a traditional naturopath, by trade. And that means, number one, I believe in living as close to nature as possible. But number two, I believe that there's one illness, and that's the absence of health, whatever that means for you. And considering the fact that the endogenous cannabinoid system is literally designed to help our bodies manage stress and also to induce homeostasis, or the balance in the system. That's my job. As a traditional naturopath, my job is to help you obtain, maintain, regain homeostasis, you know what I mean, or balance. So by focusing on the science of the particular system that helps to actually achieve that, that is really, where me getting in the lab and being, I'm an herbalist, so mixing all my concoctions and doing all of those things really comes to light, and where, my true passion lies. Besides the fact that, Kiana Foundation, our 501c3 nonprofit, is leading the charge, and that I've lost 2 children to pediatric cancer and a sister, my only sibling, to cancer. My family's not predisposed for cancer. There's no genetic correlation between any of the cancer that has happened in my family. So there's definitely work that needs to be done in the research field. So what do I hope to accomplish? What I hope to accomplish with this campus, and sort of what we rolled out just today, is to have a vertically integrated research model where we control everything, We control the cultivation, the manufacturing of products, the writing of protocols, the giving that to, the patients. We control all of it so that we can really understand that science and also open that up to international markets where they can come and study with us. And now that, cannabis is walking down the road of Schedule 3 for state licensed medical, that we can actually have some credibility given to not just cannabis, but all botanical medicine. Because, I don't have to tell you all that most pharmaceuticals are derived from botanicals, and a lot has been lost when pharmacognosy turned to pharmacology. So I want to sort of bring that back. And I'm very hopeful for the future, and doing this in honor, of my children and those that have been lost, because people are dying and they don't have to.
Yes, and I just love you so much, Lakisha. I can't imagine what you've been through. I've watched you go through some of your journey with your children, and I honor you and respect you so much. Thank you for all that you do and continue to do, and working to remedy the things that have impacted you and your family so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And attorney Scheril Murray Powell has made it to the stage, everyone. Oh my gosh, how exciting is this?
Greetings. I am super excited. I'm super hyped to be on your dais, your virtual dais. Happy Nurses Week. Happy Nurses Appreciation Week to all of you present here. I'm super excited. The fact that we get to kickstart this week of activity and events is really an honor. To Nurse Heather, my bona fide sister, and for all these years, always smiling, always raising the banner for science, for medicine, for patients. If she asks, I'm gonna say yes. I'll just say it like that, because we have such a deeply rooted friendship in this cause. We've seen each other on the peripheral doing this work, and we've gotten an opportunity recently to do this work together with the work we're doing at University of Miami, Cannabis Nurses Task Force, as well as Dr. Lakisha as well. So it's something that I always wanted to do, is for us to be together doing this work. But it's this industry has its ups and downs. For some of us, it's less of an industry and more of a calling. So when you see it treated like just industry, it can be very distressing. And I've had some low points, some low moments, and during one of my lows, Nurse Heather was right there with me, and she, I had the very big ugly cry at an event, and she was right there holding my hair back and saying, "I get it, I understand," because we want so much for patients to get what they deserve. We want so much for patients to not be just seen as a vehicle to more money, and it's heartbreaking when you feel like almost like you were made a fool of sometimes, when people are like, patient this, patient that, and then as soon as it's legal, it's just like, all right, sales strategy. It really is heartbreaking when you sacrifice like time with your family and with your children, and you paid out of your own pocket like thousands, if not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars just for travel and all the things, so that we can have legal access for patients. So, I really truly consider Nurse Heather to be a sister in this cause. She's proved herself time and time again that she is righteous, and we're on the same page. And again, I have to say the same about Mary Lynn Mathre and Patients at a Time. So I'll start my introduction there and say, my name is Scheril Murray Powell Esquire. I'm a cannabis agricultural dietary supplement trade, psychedelics regulatory, and now immigration attorney. And I feel I know that sometimes when I list all those things, there's a guffaw somewhere in the ether, because like you can't really be all those things. But I was started out as a cannabis attorney, and then each thing has been added based on what the people needed. So when we had, CBD was going hot, heavy, and hard, and I was like, nobody's representing my people. I was like, I got to become a dietary supplement attorney. What organizations can I join? What can I learn about it? And that's how I became a dietary supplement attorney. When I went to talk to the Black farmers, that's how I became an ag attorney. When we were trying to, when there, and I'm still fearful of indigenous medicine, plant medicine being misrepresented, especially in the psychedelic space where it can only look a certain way and be in a medical setting, when it's like, no, like millennia, we've been having our own environments, and we're not going to give up that easy. So it's like, I need to be a psychedelics attorney, and that's how, and that, everything starts with the laws and the regulations. So that's how I became a regulatory attorney. So I've added the areas of law that I practice, not from an economic perspective, but really based on the fact that if my people need something, at least I know they can come to me. And when I create more of me, then I usually move on to something else. I've recently taken on the role as the executive director of Patients Out of Time. Mary Lynn Mathre is someone I've looked up to and appreciated. I don't consider to be, she's in my age group, right? So she was on the forefront very young, very early as a nurse and veteran. And, I've watched her at conferences. I've watched her, raise the money with a smile. I've watched her use it for a good cause. Patients at a Time conference for me, before Mary Lynn became very close, was like aspirational, because I was like, I would see a doctor at Patients at a Time, and I'd be like, oh, you're speaking? And these are doctors I see speak all over the place. And they're like, no, I'm just here to learn. That's the caliber of speaker that Patients at a Time is known for. Patients at a Time is where nurses and doctors came to get educated. I remember when I started, I was on Cannabis Life Radio in 2016, and we were like, ha ha, we gotta be careful the police don't pull up on us radio station. And it was like we were half laughing, half serious. This is 2016. So when you think about 30 years ago, Mary Lynn saying, hey, university, I want to have a cannabis conference here, she was taking a huge, huge, huge risk. And like, even when I sit there and I talk to Mary Lynn, I went to her farm maybe last year, I'm going to go soon. And we're sitting back and talking, and her memory is impeccable. Like me, I was like, I can't remember that. This menopause brain, whatever. Listen, she will be like, oh, that was this study, XYZ. Do you know this doctor in Jamaica, blah, 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 blah. She is such a global repository of information and knowledge, because there was nothing else educationally when she was doing that work. So for me to take on the mantle and be the executive director, and not in a replacement, from a replacement perspective, but to be able to work hand in hand and march side by side with Mary Lynn as we continue this work of Patient Out of Time is a huge, huge honor. So I have my legal work that I'm very proud of. I have my recent work with Patient Out of Time. I have been a board member for 7 years, so I think she vetted me. Yeah. So I've been on the board for 7 years before I became executive director. But I've been on lots of boards, because I've always diversified boards and then passed on to other people of color. I've been general counsel for a number of nonprofit organizations, but for vets, Minorities for Medical Marijuana, I always say, was my first job in cannabis, even though it was volunteer work, but it was my first entry point. And I got, that's how I got to know a lot of people and things like that. So I love the work that I do. I love the courageous physicians and nurses that said yes, that answered the call. It was not easy, ostracized by their professions. The canna moms and the canna dads that would take 3 hours probably in the morning to get their child who's in a wheelchair dressed so that they can advocate for us, having to brush their teeth, change their diapers, even teenagers' diapers and things like that before they would show up at the Capitol and we can use them as the example of why do we legalize. I have so much love and admiration for them, and that's why I do this work that I do. So salute to the nurses, starting organizations, finding their home here with Nurse Heather, and you're just getting started. That's the way I look at it. Know that you do have colleagues that respect you. I think every jurisdiction should allow nurses, at least nurse practitioners, to be recommenders of cannabis. And you guys are the ones who identify things first a lot of the time. So it's a true honor. I know this is a long introduction, but you're at the end of my day. So that's when I let my hair down. So I just got to let my hair down a little bit with you. I just came in, into the house, and I wanted to have a stable place for this great conversation with you all. Back to the science. So as I mentioned, plant medicine is indigenous medicine. I'm always going to be the one to say what we do is science to traditional medical practitioners, roots people. What we do is very scientific, whether it's scientific based on the moon and the sun and all these things, whether it's scientific based on just overall health and wellness and spiritual and sacramental, it's still scientific. And oftentimes it takes science a long time to catch up to what we're doing in the traditional space. But we welcome the scientific, more, traditional scientific or accepted scientific minds, so that we can measure and memorialize, and we don't have to start over every generation with this science. So please, Nurse Heather, I hope I didn't go on too long.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Scheril. And it makes me want to ask you, because you are working with Ethiopian and Rastafarian communities with cannabis as sacrament for sacramental purposes. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? And also you too, Dr. Lakisha, you've got some background in that as well. I'd love to hear your take. I'm specifically with the cannabis and sacramental, because I think it's a little different there maybe than it is with some of the other psychedelics. Maybe not.
No, thank you so much. So I'm definitely one of the people on the forefront of the sacramental rights movement, as is Dr. Lakisha. She did a lot of work in Jamaica. We've met up in Jamaica over the years and things like that. She works with Rastafari. She is Rastafari. I am Rastafari. When we talk about sacramental, first we have to address the religious freedom violations that take place. So when we think about the Puritans and other faith-based groups that have been violated over history, we can recognize that as a violation of religious freedom, a violation of culturally protected rights, UN protected rights. But when it comes to like Rastafari, people don't see it the same way. But literally, as Rastafari, we can't just go to any dispensary and select cannabis. So we're illegal, how we, as practitioners, we're illegal, not just because we don't have licenses, but because we can't just go to a dispensary, because the chain of custody is so important to our sacramental practices, our ritualistic practices, our ceremonial practices. Our ceremonial practices start from seed selection. So if you're not doing the right practices with regards to seed selection, with regards to planting, with regards to breeding, with regards to how you talk to the plant, your mental state when you're engaging with the plant, different cycles of life that are happening for you, especially as women, when you're engaging with the plant, that's also something that's part of what we believe. To the harvest time, how the harvest happens, how the harvest is a family-oriented activity. You will have 3 generations harvesting, and there'll be psalms that are read, different things like that, as Rastafari, to the consumption, the use of a chalice, the psalms, the socialization that happens around our beliefs and our values. All those things don't take place with dispensary cannabis. So that's why we promote the narrative around sacramental use is so important, because these are people who are still at vulnerable to arrest and persecution. So I just wanted to talk about the religious freedom violations, human rights violation that happens to us as Rastafari. We recognize that we're not the only ones with these types of spiritual sacramental right practices associated with cannabis. African indigenous culture and African spiritualism going back to Congo, their bringing of cannabis to the North America predates Columbus by probably thousands of years. So just with that knowledge that there's African spiritualism, there's Rastafari, there's Hindu use sacramentally with bong and some of their holidays and things like that. And then Native American indigenous use as well. So we don't think it's just something that we have as Rastafari. It's something that is shared across faith-based culture. So we've been evangelizing faith-based use with rule makers or regulators and legislators hoping for movement. The Virgin Islands is the first jurisdiction in the United States that recognized the sacramental use for Rastafari. So it's a huge step in the right direction. First modern state to recognize sacramental use to Rastafari, and Maroons is Jamaica with the amendment to the Dangerous Drug Act of 2015. So talking about the religious freedom aspect of it, also talking about the persecution aspect of it is very important. So what persecution looked like for Rastafari is incarceration, mental institutions, cutting of your locks, being ostracized from your families, beatings in street, murders in streets in some jurisdictions, like kill on sight messaging from governments. That's what Rastafari endured. So that's another aspect of the trauma. And then what that brings us to is, what does policy around that look like in modern time? Some of the rules have been relaxed and people are like, you should be good now. But again, you haven't acknowledged our sacramental use and all the things that we need for us to consider this ganja to be sacramental. So that's where the work happens for me, is more around the policy side of it, access points to make chain of custody that we will accept to the level of purity that will be sacramental cannabis. So that's how I approach this work. I'll let Dr. Lakisha speak for herself, and then it moves on to the scientific studies, calling attention to Dr. Melanie Dreher's study, which is very famous. I'll let Mary Lynn speak more to it. They've been long-term friends. I feel like we've been long-term friends, but not to the level that Mary Lynn has been, her friend and colleague in this work. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about, in terms of sacramental, her study, starting out as a student, going to Jamaica for multiple years. And we have a really good interview with her in our Road to 30 podcast that we're going to release soon. And I'll make sure that you can alert your audience. But, studying Rastafari women who consume during their pregnancy, which is still very taboo, believe it or not, like 30 years later. It was a study. It took what we do regularly and made it scientific. And that is one of the most referenced studies in the history of the world by laymen, by lay people. So it's scientific, but it's still relatable for regular people, that they go to that study. In Rastafari culture, it's something that's just known, especially by us women, that this study took place. Someone cared enough to come down and ask the questions and legitimize the fact that we do use cannabis when we're pregnant for a number of ailments, right? And her journey to that study is really fascinating. So I hope you watch the podcast interview, because I learned so much more than I knew before. So looking at the science and the research that can be done around the sacramental faith-based use of cannabis is also very, very important. And the policy changes around a sacramental use. So I'm going to close out by saying I have developed a number of standards that are going through the ASTM balloting process. One is defining sacramental use, Rastafari Ital, Rastafari Livity, ceremonial use, and having definitions that any jurisdiction, when they come online as a cannabis legal state, when they get their laboratory sanitization standard, they're also going to get the definition, which hopefully will save people's lives who are Rastafari and faith-based users, and at least give them a consideration. In addition to that, I came up with 4 models for incorporating sacramental use into legal structures. So it doesn't have to be this distinct thing. The first, model is about it being distinct, where it's the Jamaica model. So in Jamaica, and Dr. Lakisha can speak more to that because she was living there. I was visiting there during the development of this process. But the Ministry of Justice is over sacramental. The CLA, Cannabis Licensing Authority, is over, regular commercialization. So that's the Jamaica model, which is easy to implement. The second model is through home cultivation, which I use that a lot in jurisdictions. When someone comes out with a home cultivation a policy or regulation, I'm always like, why can't we call it home and sacramental? Because if you're using it at home, you should be able to extend that for your sacramental use at home, and then further extend that for your house of worship. So if you can use it at home, you should be able to use it in the house of worship. So usually I'll say, let's change the title and all the language from just home cultivation or personal cultivation to home or personal and sacramental cultivation. The third model is a micro business where there's a small vertical. That's my preferred, where a house of worship or someone like myself, because I have a micro business license in New York, can say, this is for a house of worship. And we can own the chain of custody for our vertical, for our people. And we can even put it into regular dispensaries so other faith-based users know that we use these protocols and this certification in order to develop this cannabis. So you know that it's at the level of purity, that it's considered sacramental, and that we have prayed over it, and that we have had the right article when it was being grown. There weren't angry people growing your cannabis, and all the things that make our sacramental ganja sacramental. And then the fourth model is where none of that exists. You create it for houses of worship, where Tommy is going to be your cultivator, Johnny's going to be your processor, and manufacturer, and then Ross Glenn will be doing retail. So you give different people different licenses so they can come together as a house of worship, and we can ensure those civil rights aren't violated. And we can also ensure that people who are sacramental users know where to find sacramental cannabis. So I'm going to close there, but I referenced some things that I think Dr. Lakisha can go deeper on, and some things that Mary Lynn can go deeper on, especially her relationship with Dr. Dreher, which took something traditional and made it scientific, but also the work that Dr. Dreher has done for many decades at universities and with patients at a time. So thank you so much for allowing me this time to speak.
Fascinating. Thank you, Scheril. Now you all understand why we invited attorney Scheril Murray Powell to be with us today. Thank you. Thank you. That was so beautiful. Much gratitude to you. Dr. Lakisha.
That was very thorough. Scheril, I have to give it to you. That was thorough, overview of all of it, because it's very true. For me, I'm Indigenous American. So I come from that. Let's start there. My grandfather, is an Indigenous healer, in the South. So that's, my background, it's my history, and it's what I understand. But I was raised Southern Baptist. So coming up in the church and, religious, good old Christian guilt, and religion and things, that religious, persecution and other things are very, important topics. So I used those two things when I went to Jamaica, and sort of literally fell into, by way of my husband, into the Rastafarian culture, and really sort of immersing myself and being introduced to the Bobo Shanti mansion of Rastafari, and going to, Zion Hill, and going to church and having the ceremonies. And then, being asked to serve on the board, for the church, being asked to, because they actually have, so the Ethiopia Africa Black International Congress Church of Salvation actually has a United Nations charter. So being asked for their rights for sacramental cannabis, being asked to actually be their United Nations representative, being asked by other groups to sign on to the WHO vote that, took cannabis off of the dangerous drugs, and actually being able to do that as the representative of a Rastafarian church, being able to do that. And in Jamaica, introducing the California model, just like, Attorney Scheril said, the model where we have our Rastafarian, our indigenous rights to be able to handle this outside of the confines of the Cannabis Licensing Authority, having a carve out, from another governing body in Jamaica. But how do you actually put that into practice? Being able to say, well, California had a perfect example, with the model of everyone coming together in a collective or cooperative fashion, and being able to create systems. Because remember, California, we legalized medically in 1996. We didn't regulate till 2016 because my team was a part of actually doing that. I was the president of the California Cannabis Industry Association at that time, and being able to do that. So I took all of that knowledge and information over to Jamaica and said, here's a model that you can actually use that's protection, not just for the sacramental use of cannabis, but for the indigenous rights of people, period. Because that's really what it's about, at the end of the day. And I'm happy to say that, even after some time off, they reached out to me recently, and I've resumed my responsibilities with the church. We're going to be at the United Nations this summer. I'm really excited about that. I'm happy to bring that indigenous knowledge of not only sacrament, but healing to the research campus that we have here in New York, and bring it under a regulated framework and say, listen, let me show you all of the ways, whether it's religion, it's sacrament, it's indigenous medicine, it's cultural, all of it. Let me show you the way that we can also fit that under the science heading. So everyone, has a coverage and an umbrella and legal protection. Because at the end of the day, when I heard about all of the suffering, that Rastafarians in Jamaica, loss of life, overuse of a botanical will never be okay. It will never be okay. So I'm happy that we have pioneers like Attorney Scheril that on the law side, on the regulatory side, on the writing standard side, can come in and say, listen, I can't be the only person in the room, shouting it from the rooftops. We just need more of us in this space and in this circle, spreading the exact same message. So I'm blessed to be a part and be here. And thank you for the time to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Lakisha. Mary Lynn, talk to us about Melanie Dreyer and her epic work, and talk about Patients Out of Time too. You have been in this game for so long. You've seen so many things emerge and change and happen. What are some of the most encouraging things that you've witnessed over the years as well?
Wow. Yeah, well, just going back to Melanie, I always consider her my mentor. When I found out about her, it was, I guess it goes back in time, 85. I completed my master's thesis, which was a survey on cannabis users. Would they, if they were asked by their physician or nurse, if they use cannabis, would they admit to use? This is 1984, 85. And at the time, it's just say no. So I went through Normal. They allowed me to put the survey through. And at the time, and then finishing the survey, I got involved with Normal. And Melanie Dreyer was on the board of Normal, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. And so I not only met her, I met the federal patients, but it was so great to see. I mean, she was at a level as a dean at a school of nursing at this time and doing research on pregnant women in Jamaica, also doing the smoking the ganja in Jamaica as well, the working men in ganja. But the idea that she went there, and as Scheril was saying, more of a regular study. She was doing it as getting her PhD in anthropology. So you're really looking at how things happen in different cultures and seeing these women using it and then following the babies for years after it to find out, hey, they're developing just fine. And by the way, historically, in Jamaican culture, they would often, moms who didn't maybe use cannabis medicinally or anything, but they might have given the baby some ganja tea first thing, just thinking it's helping them. And when you think back and you recognize the endocannabinoid system, it's kind of like giving the baby a little boost, to get the munchies going and suckle. But Melanie was one of the great meetings that I had. I remember meeting, it was back in the day of meeting Dr. Andy Weil, who had just in the late 60s getting his medical degree doing research on Jamaicans. And I remember he spoke to us at some time back then saying, he thought once he did at Harvard, it was just looking at what are the effects, what's the blood pressure, what's the pulse, how is it affecting them physiologically, and recognizing that, gee, there's no great harm happening. He's thinking, it'll be legal in 5 years. You're talking the end of the 60s, and here we are, 2026, talking about moving it to Schedule 3. But Lester Grinspoon, meeting him, the biggest thing probably was meeting the federal patients. It's like, what? There are patients getting marijuana from the federal government? What's this all about? And to find out about this, Bob Randall being the first patient to do it, but the fact that there was this way to get cannabis. And then as we learned about that, what was it? I think by 1990 with Normal, we had our first, I was helping with the conference, medical conference, and we had the first 5 patients together. And that conference was historic in that C-SPAN actually came and recorded it. It was held in Washington, D.C. And so around the country, people were seeing these 5 patients looking like it could be your grandma, your grandpa, somebody's husband, whatever. And they're talking about their use of cannabis and the fact that they get it from the federal government. Now, granted, it was really crap that they got. And the studies that we've been doing all these years, if you ever could get your license to study cannabis, you were going to get this low grade, freeze dried, old medicine. Sometimes it was older than the canisters they would get their cannabis in would be 15 years old. This stuff had been freeze dried. Here you go, have some medicine, but they were doing well. And that was 1990. By 1992, the federal government closed that program, and that the patient population had gone from 5 patients in the program to 15, with more than 30 patients being promised their medicine but hadn't gotten it, and hundreds waiting for their medicine, mostly HIV/AIDS patients. And the government just decided, this was not supposed to be a well-known program. We didn't want people to know about it. We're shutting it down. And they literally only left those 15 patients continue their medicine. That was 92. Then 95 comes along. And by 1995, there were only 8 of the 15 still alive. And that's when it was kind of like, this is really not good. And healthcare professionals are too afraid to come to a Normal conference. So that literally got us to say, let's start Patients Out of Time. And for those who haven't, it's funny because I taught a class at University of Virginia on substance abuse. I would always teach the class on cannabis. And the professor there said after about the 8th year, I just figured out the acronym is POT. But, we always say Patients Out of Time because it was the name that was important. And the whole story is, this isn't, as we all know, this plant was around before us. I mean, it's been around forever and ever. It fits our system. We've evolved together in many ways. And to come all this time and to see that they're not allowing people to use a medicine that, it's made for us. And when you think of nursing, in fact of it, it's probably one of our best gifts out there, helping people sleep, helping people eat, helping people feel better. just getting them on the road of, as Lakisha says, the idea of the endocannabinoid system keeping us in balance. And this is patients at a time, the idea that this medicine's been around forever. And to tell a patient they can't have it because we need more research, when there's been no plant studied more than cannabis to find the devil in it. And, they didn't. Instead, they found the endocannabinoid system. It's the idea that, and then somebody will go, oh, yes, somebody died from it or something. Was it a synthetic one? Was it some kind of concentrate? It's like people die every day, every year. I mean, you can look from over-the-counter aspirin. You can drink too much water and die. So here's this plant that gives so much. And people are out there trying to find one little thing that's negative and blow it up like we shouldn't ever use it. And I think we all know nothing works for everyone. It's not a cure-all. It's not going to fix everything. But again, as Lakisha saying, with the cancer, we know it can really help. And the endocannabinoid system, part of that is to recognize unhealthy cancerous cells in our body and literally have them commit suicide. Get rid of those cancerous cells, and somehow we get out of balance and cancer takes over. We've seen cannabis cure cancer, but do we know, that so-and-so has pancreatic cancer? Here, take this. We don't know. That's the science we want. We want the science to figure out what works for which person. And Patients Out of Time is basically saying, we don't have time for all of you to get this all research done. It's safe, we want it now, and it means life and death. And that's all over. We're finding that all over. It's life and death, it's quality of life. And the idea that you're telling somebody they cannot plant a seed, they can't have this medicine is ridiculous. And we need more docs like Lakisha, naturopaths and DOs who recognize plants. They recognize food as so important, and the cannabis seed, hemp hearts. I mean, I'm just a big fan of that. It's nutrition for everybody, and we don't teach that. Our medical profession, I'm so glad to see. I saw that they just passed something about nutrition, having more hours of nutrition in med school. It's like, well, it's about time. Again, the naturopathic medicine, the osteopathy, they got it a bit more, that it's whole health. But modern medicine, they just want a quick pill. And as we know, those silver bullets, they come with a lot of side effects. And cannabis comes with a plant that's just wonderful. And again, I could go on forever and ever of the different people I've met, but it's Norman Zinberg, who's now dead. But way back when, he wrote from Drug Set and Setting and literally taught us about, you use psychoactive drugs. You need to know about that drug, but what is the setting you're taking it in and what are your expectations? And it's going to be, when it comes to psychoactive drugs, we want to make sure people are educated about it and know how to use it safely. I could go on, but
No, we love to hear from you, Mary Lynn. You're such a wealth of not only information, but the history. And not because it's something you read, but something you've lived. And I just so appreciate you sharing your memories with us. It's invaluable, and I'm just so grateful that you're here. And like Scheril said, your memory is like so good. You remember it was 1990, and then we got on to 90. I mean, it's just amazing. I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, and here you are remembering these things from decades ago. So one of the things I wanted to ask is, each one of you have been such great supporters of nurses. I know Dr. Lakisha and Scheril, we serve on the University of Miami, the Cannabis Nurse Task Force together. Mary Lynn, you are the mother of cannabis nursing, period, end stop. And as supporters of nurses, if you could leave the next generation of cannabis nurses with one message of encouragement or wisdom, what would that be?
I think for nurses, it is the core of what we do in nursing. If we understand the endocannabinoid system, which is about, again, I think Lakisha, you said it better, but it's not only maintaining health, but it's regaining when you've been stressed or whatever. This is a key. And it's, to me, I'm going to be happy when I know that when I'm looking at the ANA, I've been a longtime member of the American Nurses Association, and we get our weekly, updates and all this kind of stuff, and they'll have postings. And I want to see those postings that every hospital out there is looking for a cannabis nurse expert, no excuse. And every university should be having endocannabinoid system integrated into the curriculum and cannabis integrated into this. So, that's my goal. Hang in there, nurses, because I think the best thing is we're on the right track. So no matter the law, it was made by, it had to do with greed, racism, and all this other stuff. We're in the right. This plant is just so beneficial. Don't let anything stop you. I guess that's it. And that's for me. I'm stubborn in that way. It's like, this is the right thing. Patients' rights. And again, that's nursing. We're a patient advocate. So not to advocate for their right is you're not doing your job. You don't have to like it. You don't have to use it. But if it's benefiting somebody, you better be standing up for that person. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to piggyback right on that, because that's part of my message. Don't be afraid. Like, just don't be afraid. You are necessary. You are the bridge, coming from, like I said, having children and, family members that have battled, spending endless amounts of time in hospitals, right with nurses, you have an intimate knowledge and understanding of the medical field more than doctors, unless you're a naturopath, like me, like you said, we learn a lot of that, in school. Don't be afraid to step out. Don't be afraid to learn. Don't be afraid to implement, that knowledge, because the bedside manner and care and concern of a nurse is really what issues in health and healing more than the medicine, more than the hospital setting. I'm telling you from personal experience, like, this is what I know. The conversations that are had at the bedside between patient and nurses are complete night and day from the conversations at bedside with patients and doctors. You are the first line of defense. Educate yourself, stand in your conviction, don't be afraid. That would be my advice.
I'll jump in here, and what I'll say is there's something that there's a nugget of gold in what Mary Lynn said when she was first speaking or just speaking, and it's looking at things from a cellular level and how cannabis gets rid of bad cells. Do not underestimate the value of looking at medicine and science from a cellular level. I'm the international president for the Ethiopian World Federation Incorporated. As I mentioned, I'm Rastafari. And one thing that I've learned, and I'm also a member of the UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association. So something I've learned on this spiritual journey is the value in fasting. Fasting is a great way to restart your immune system, to get rid of bad cells. When you're fasting, when your body's in a fasting state, it kills off these cells. So that's the thing I really wanted to highlight in what Mary Lynn was talking about, is really look at the practices that result the annihilation, the elimination of bad cells, because that's where these diseases start, with these bad cells taking up residence in your body and staying there. Another methodology, and again, fasting is a spiritual practice and has been, again, for millennia. So when you combine the cannabis used for millennia with the fasting of faith-based community for millennia, this year is very special because it was the first year that Ramadan, Lent, and there was a third religious practice. It was it the Hindu practice where everything started within 24 hours of each other. We were all fasting at the same time. Very interesting times that we're in from a spiritual perspective. But look at that cellular health, because that'll lead you to long-term wellness. Mary Lynn also highlighted what you're eating. So look at traditional fruits and vegetables and what their purpose is with regards to health from a cellular level all the way to a day-to-day level, looking at papaya seeds and what it does with regards to parasites in your body, looking at olive leaf extract, because it has a similar representation in the body as cannabis as well, but it's completely legal. There's a great indigenous scientist, Brother Heru, who studied that, and he actually has an olive oil extract product that he sells that I've utilized. But getting rid of parasites there have been studies going back to the 1800s tying parasites and cancer. We don't talk enough about that. So looking at the anti-parasitic properties of traditional medicine, looking at the antiviral properties of cannabis and other types of medicine, and really understanding what it's doing at a cellular level to lead to your overall health, and then combining that in whatever your spiritual practices are, combining that with a fasting regimen so that you can get rid of these old decaying cells that can form and work against you as cancer or other types of illnesses. Those are things that we have very much control over, and those are the ways that nurses tend to lead, because they can they're not just always looking at the pharmaceutical, because pharmaceuticals are important. I have to take Synthroid every day for my thyroid. I'm never going to stop. I have to for the rest of my life. I'm not anti-pharmaceutical, but I do want us to understand the value in looking at these natural ways of being. And when you talk about sacramental, it is about your nutrition. It's about your grooming. It's about your anti-parasitic strategies. It's your fasting strategies. All of it works together for good.
I just thought before we end, I want to make sure the other thing for nurses is, it drives me crazy. Coming back from an addictions background, fight this, nurses. Again, we are often the first ones that the patients might really open up to, hopefully. But the idea that patients are either drug tested and they get a positive for cannabis, and or they admit to use on the admission, and the next thing you know, their chart has cannabis use disorder in it. It's like, please follow that up if you see it with your patients. It's happening to veterans. It's just ridiculous. And then the next thing you know, there's an attitude about him. Oh, it's a druggie. It's a druggie. And it's like, healthcare people are missing this great opportunity to find out, well, why are you using it?
Ask a question.
Exactly, because to make that diagnosis, you have to answer, you have to get at least 2 criteria to have a minimal, cannabis use disorder. Just the fact that you have it in your system does not work. And if you're a patient, the fact that you might have tolerance or physical dependence on it does not qualify as a criteria, because you do get tolerance and dependence on any opiates, but we don't call them addicts if it's a pain patient using it appropriately. So it's like this idea that all of a sudden they've got this label on their chart based on nothing, based on the fact that they use cannabis. Well, I'm going to give them cannabis use disorder. Help your patients, and stick up to them. And you got to challenge that whoever wrote that diagnosis. What did you base it on? How did that patient answer those questions that you came to that conclusion? Because it's getting on a lot of charts. And of course, the government then uses it to tell everybody, what is it? Sam's smart approaches to marijuana.
Kevin's a vet.
Now he wants to make it all negative, and it's like, well, that's it's a misdiagnosis, and we need to correct it.
Yes, great point, Mary Lynn. What a beautiful and important conversation this has been. Tonight reminded us that cannabis medicine is about so much more than policy, products, and protocols. At its core, this movement has always been about people, patients searching for relief, providers willing to listen differently, and leaders courageous enough to challenge the status quo. Each of our speakers shared something incredibly valuable tonight. The reminder that progress happens when science, compassion, advocacy, and humanity come together. To everyone joining us, especially the nurses in our community, please remember this: your voice matters. It is shaping the future of healthcare. The questions you ask, the patients you advocate for, the education you pursue, and the conversations you're willing to have all create a ripple effect far beyond what you see today. Thank you for being here, for staying curious, and for helping to lead this movement forward with integrity and heart. Thank you so much to our guest speakers, Scheril, Mary Lynn, Lakisha. Deep gratitude to each one of you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us tonight.